The 2000 Nissan Pathfinder has the steering rack boot is busted, and you need to replace that so dirt and grit don't get on that and destroy the seal up in there, right, on the rack itself. That will cause the fluid to start leaking in that area. So we're going to replace the boot on the right side and the left side. To do that, jack your car up. Make sure you put jack stands underneath it. Right, you can jack it up if you have a flow jack from the cross member that runs across the bottom here in the front. And I'll pick up both sides, then you can set it up on jack stands underneath the sides of the car. Find the most firm area there. You'll put your jack stands. And then, once you got that, take the wheel off. With the wheel off, turn, if you got, I'm doing the right side, so I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the right. And then what I'm going to do then is loosen this nut, this castle nut. The castle nut has a cotter pin running through it. What I did to get the castle nut off, the cotter pin off, on the end that's folded, not the ends that's bent over. The U part of the castle nut, I took a pair of wire cutters, grabbed onto it. Like I said, this part is sticking out here through the castle nut. I grabbed onto it and just pry against the knuckle, and it came out. There's a special tool you can buy, look something like a pick with a hook on it. You can stick through the hole in the castle nut and get it out that way. But you have to straighten this end because the ends of it have turned over to lock it so it won't come out. Okay, once you get that out, use a 22 millimeter socket or a 7/16 socket. In this case, I'm gonna use a wrench just in case someone have wrenches but no sockets. You can place that on there, okay? And if you turn it, you need to turn it, you're kind of working like upside down. So you would need to turn it clockwise, right? If you're sitting down in a chair, you turn it clockwise to loosen it. The clock goes this way if you're looking down on the clock, so you turn it that way. If you want to tighten it, you turn it counterclockwise. Now, I've already loosened this. What I did to loosen this, I put that 22 millimeter wrench on and I tried pulling on it. It didn't work. Not enough leverage. A little trick you can do is take another combination wrench, stick it in this way to give you more leverage. Hold this firmly and pull onto that, and you will get more leverage. The longer it is, the more torque you apply. So once this is loosened, I will turn it loose a little bit, right? And this tie rod end was locked into here. I couldn't pull it out. With a baby sledge, a decent sized hammer, you want to hit right on this area. This area right here. Leave the nut on, because if you miss and hit the thread of the tie rod end, you wouldn't be able to get this nut back on easily, okay? So leave it on and give it 1 or 2 good whacks. Make sure you don't hit the boot, so you don't split the boot. Once you whack it, this is gonna pop out. You'll notice it will set itself free like that. And then you can take the nut off, and this will come right out. Okay? Now, what you should do before you take that out is loosen this nut. This is the lock nut, right? That locks in the tie rod end. So this rod won't spin, because if you don't lock it in, this rod over time will start rotating, and then your alignment will go out of adjustment. Now, before loosening this nut, so you don't have to realign this vehicle, you can count threads. See how many threads are visible from the back of the nut to the end of the thread. Or what I did, I took a sharp You can use a punch and just scribe a line along here, right? The line isn't very deep. You can't see it easily on the video. I don't know if you can see that line. There's different shading right up in here. Or you can take, what I would do is take a piece of electrical tape of some type of tape and wrap it around close up to the nut. And hopefully, I like to do both, because if you only do it one way, if I only wrap the tape around, it's likely that when I'm sliding that boot on or off, that tape might shift. Okay? So bring it right up to the nut and wrap it around, so you know when you put your nut on where to stop. So now with this out, I can remove the tie rod end. If you have problem removing the tie rod end, if it's rusted or something, you might have to lock this part up, and there's this hex right here where you can put a wrench on it. Okay? If you don't have a hex, get a decent vice grip, lock it on, hold it, or a pipe wrench or something, and take this off. Okay? With this off, then you can remove the nut. Now, I ain't putting this back together. I will lube up the threads, so if I have to do this again, I won't have a problem working with that. Now, what I'm having now, I'm trying to take this off, and everything is turning. Okay, so I will have to lock this up. All right? Okay, I sprayed a little WD-40 on here so it'll come up a little easily, and it's working off. It's still the same 22 millimeter wrench, or a 7/8 you can use for this nut. Now it depends on whether it's the original or aftermarket. You might have different size nuts on here. I believe this hex here is 14 millimeter. I just used an adjustable wrench on this area, so I wouldn't have to get up and go and get another wrench. So I already had this adjustable here. Okay, with the nut off, I'm gonna try and slide this boot off. All right, I sprayed the rod down with a little WD-40 to make it a little easier to slide off. The tape is still on here. You can see the rust of where the nut was up to here. All right, so now I'm gonna slide the boot off, and I depress the clamp on here. Squeeze that. And try and get this off. The clamp is kind of stuck on there. I'm gonna break it off because the new boot came with new clamp. All right. Okay, I've gotten the clamp off. Like I said, since we're gonna put a new clamping system on here, I don't need the old clamp, and it was easier to just break it off than to go through the trouble that it was giving me to get off. And plus, I didn't want the clamp on here as I slide it over to disturb the tape. As you can see, the tape is already beginning to unravel. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is, with a razor blade, I'm going to split this boot right here. Make it a little easier to come off without disturbing the tape. Stick a screwdriver up in here and see if I can make it a bigger hole. Okay, got it off. as you can see, the smaller section of the boot that clamps onto the rack itself is still on the vehicle. Now I have to go and remove that clamp and get that piece off before sliding this on. And as you can see, the aftermarket one is a little bit, I think it's a little bit smaller. It's not as big in diameter as the original one. This right here is the inner tie rod end. That screws into the rack, which is back here. Okay? And that also has two flat sides, opposing flat sides that you can put a wrench on to turn to loosen it. Right now, I don't know what size wrench that is, but if you have a big adjustable wrench, you can use that on that to loosen that. If you're changing the whole tie rod end or just the inner tie rod end. Since we are not, we're leaving that in there, and I'm just going to do the boot. Okay, right here is the other piece of the steering rack boot. This shiny piece right here is the clamp. I'm going to remove this clamp simply by, it's one of those that like a pinch, the sides are pinched together to tighten up. So I'm going to have to spread this open. Several ways you can do that. Put a punch up in this hole. There's a round hole here, a long punch, and wiggle it around, or a long screwdriver and wiggle it until it loosens. Or you can try and get something flat underneath this, the band right here. It's kind of hard to do if you go in that route. Okay? Or what I'm doing now is trying to slide it in here underneath this side of the boot. And as you can see, it's moving, but I need more leverage. So let me get that out, then we'll go back to filming. Okay, this is the piece I was trying to get off. That's the clamp right here. As I was saying, if you can get something in between here, like a screwdriver the right size or a punch, and then work it, stick it in through the hole and work it this way and that way, and it will tend to loosen it up. All right, or if you can get something in there to cut it, just cut it off, because we're replacing it. Right, that's the rest of the boot. Before you put the boot on, make sure you clean the tie rod here, the inner tie rod, and the part of the steering rack that's exposed. Make sure there's no debris on it. Clean that thoroughly, so when you're sliding the boot on, you don't get any grit or dirt falling in the boot and eventually getting in the system to contaminate it. Right, so now I'm going to slide this on. I might spray a little bit of WD-40 or something on here to let it slide on a little easy. Meanwhile, I got to watch out for my tape. Make sure I don't lose that tape. See, still in place. So the tape is still there, even though it started loosening a little bit. The clamp is already on this end. Make sure you have the clamp on the big end. Slide it right on over. There's a little groove down here, right in here. This part here is fatter than this area right here, so the boot gonna drop down in there. That also help keep it from coming off, okay? And when you put this one came with this type of, we're gonna secure with this. Wrap this around and twist it, okay? So now that that is on, I'm gonna go underneath and slide that portion that looks like this over the steering rack, all right? And secure the clamp on that. And come back and put this clamp on here. At this stage, before I even do that, I can run my nut back up, right back up to the tape. This way, we shouldn't have to do any alignment on this vehicle. But if you want to be on the safe side, you'll spend the $50, $60 or depends on what they charge in your area, and get this, get your vehicle realigned. Okay, and I'll put a little bit of anti-seize grease on here before I put this on. I should have done that before I put the nut on, but I didn't. Anyway, you got the idea. Now that I have this all greased up, I can run up TRN, the tie rod in here, tie rod in, take it all the way up until it stops. Wipe the excess grease off. Once it stops, the whole tie rod can rotate back so you can line it up in the hole. Okay, once it lined up in the hole, you put your castle nut on. I'm gonna see if you can use a wrench to tighten this, because sometimes it will start spinning, and this where impact a power tool comes in handy, because if it starts spinning, you keep pressure on it, hit it with a power tool, it locks up. With this one, we're fine. Again, look up the torque if you need to know. If you're a perfectionist and want everything to factory setting, look up the torque. I've been doing this long enough to know that even if I leave the nut off, the cotter pin off, I'm not going to lose that nut. But don't try that. It's always safer to put the cotter pin in. You got to turn this. There's a hole in the threaded part of the ball joint, of the tie rod end. Make sure that hole lines up with one of these castles cut out here. Okay, if it doesn't line up, try and find which one is nearest. If you need to loosen it just a hair, loosen it just a hair. If you need to tighten it a hair, go ahead, tighten it a hair, so that hole will line up. We're using the same old cotter pin. Stick it back in the hole, tap it in, and the end that comes out back here, bend that over. Okay? You can bend, there's two pieces to stick out. You can bend it both the same way. You can bend them one in one direction and one in the opposite direction. All right? And they won't come, your nut will not loosen after that, so you're safe. You leave the tape on, take it off, doesn't really matter, but I'm taking it off. Then, must make sure you lock this nut. You must lock this nut. That's why it's called a lock nut, a locking nut. So if you don't lock it up against this rod gonna rotate. If it rotates, it's going to rotate in that direction. Then your wheel going to get pushed out more this way. Or if the nut loosens up and run down the thread, it will rotate in the opposite direction, which will have your wheel to toe in. One way makes it toe out, the other way it toes in. All right. Now I'm going to go underneath and take care of that. Gonna wrap this around here now. It's just simple like that. Okay, but I'm gonna use a pair of pliers to squeeze onto here and then keep twisting it until it's tighter. And any excess I'll cut off or just wrap it around again so it don't be hanging. Okay? The wire wrap that they gave me to wrap around here, by the time I twisted it 2-3 times, it snapped. It's nothing easier than a good quality plastic tie. This is not gonna come loose or anything. This is on there. Okay? I might end up using plastic ties on the inside. Like I say, you must use a decent quality stuff because some of those plastic ties, you go to pull them, they snap. All right.